So let's begin with our session. Anyone who is familiar with what NoSQL injection is? No one? Okay. Do you have any idea about what NoSQL databases are? MongoDB. So at least you guys must be familiar with databases, right? Yeah. So what are databases? Sorry? Okay, right. So in simple terms, yeah, it's stores data and all kinds of things. But why do you think an attacker? It is one of the most what do you say? Yeah, what do you say? It's like almost each and every attacker wants to get into their database. Why is the case? Anyone? Credentials. Yeah, credentials is one. To access sensitive information. Access sensitive information like passwords. So he already said credentials. What are the other things that are stored within the databases? Yeah, PII data. So, okay. So when we talk about databases, when we talk about modern applications, this is one of the most common attack vectors which attackers use to get confidential data or get lateral access. So when we talk about what is lateral access, so what we are trying to say is, let's take an example of banking organization, right? If they have some sort of valuable information, they obviously have valuable information like account details, the amount of money we have on our accounts, the types of accounts we have like FD, RD, what are their details, what are the credit cards info, what are the debit cards info and everything, right? So each and every sensitive information is stored within the database itself. And that is the reason, one of the reasons why attackers really love to exploit databases, right? So that is one attack vector. But when we talk about large scale organizations, they not only have one application, they might have a set of applications, like they might have 20, 30, 40 applications that are connected with a single database. So just imagine a scenario where an attacker is able to get access to their database through an application, through a single application. And if the database is misconfigured, they can get data about other applications as well. Like not only that application which they compromised, but the data of the other applications that they use, or that database might be centralized to for the other applications data as well. So think of it as all the 20 applications stores their data within the same database. If the attacker is able to access that database, he gets access of all the information regarding each and every application connected to it. Got it? Yeah. So that is the second attack. That is the second reason. The third reason is when we talk about databases, right? They within itself like inbuilt functionality to execute commands, system commands, right? When we talk about certain databases, not all databases has that functionality, but when we talk about certain databases like MS SQL, which is Microsoft service something, so basically that is a database from the Microsoft client. So yeah, when we talk about that specific database, they can execute commands, system commands, as in when we use a Windows system, we do an whoami command, right? You might be familiar with OS commands, right? Whoami, ls, dir. So these commands they can execute by just accessing the database. So basically, these functionalities are embedded within the database to call to execute system files. So that is one of the other reasons that why attackers target databases, because they are really easy to exploit and they have a lot of sensitive content available, right? So the most common types of database when we talk about in general is SQL database and NoSQL database. The difference between both is basically SQL stores structured data, whereas NoSQL stores unstructured data, you could say. So for example, if you were to look at a NoSQL database, so as you could see, this is a data stored in a MongoDB database. This is how it looks like. So basically, when we look at the first three attributes of the character, so these are DC characters. So first one is the Superman. For Superman, the ID character and the real name stays the same. So the attributes like ID character, real name stays the same for both the characters, ID character, real name. But there might be certain attributes only available for a specific character. For example, Barry Allen, who is also known as the Flash, has meta abilities, whereas Superman does not, right? So these are the some of the like individual characteristics of NoSQL databases. Yeah, as you could see, the first three first three attributes are ID, character, real name, which stays the same for both the characters. But when we talk about Barry Allen, he has other attribute, that is mutabilities, which is not included in the what do you say for the character Superman, right? Okay, so that is not the case when we talk about SQL databases. And we already know there is an injection-based vulnerability specifically for SQL databases, that is SQL injection. So now today what we are going to be talking about is NoSQL injection, that is targeting the NoSQL databases and not the SQL databases, right? So it is really necessary that you understand the fundamental difference between what SQL databases and what are the characteristics attached to NoSQL databases and the characteristics attached to SQL databases, so that it is more efficient to you when you are doing a pen test or real world red team assessment, whatever it is. So what is NoSQL injection? Anyone, do you know about SQL injection? Yeah.
Putting some arbitrary code into what you can say in the form of an SQL query, so
that
we are able to retrieve some of the data from the database.
Yeah, that is one of the functionalities. Yeah, right. So when we talk about SQL databases, right, let's take an example of this. So whenever a user is able to put some sort of data to the front end, and that initiates a request to the server, and by through which when the server starts to process that particular request, what it does is basically it embeds that particular input which the user gave it into the database query which is going to be initiated from the server, so that it is retrieving certain types of data. किसी को कुछ नहीं समझा ना, मैं simplify करता हूँ. So let's take an example of login pages. ठीक है? Login pages में what are the types of input which usually user gives? हाँ, username, password. तो basically वो होता है user input, right? So when user put some sort of malicious types of input into the input parameters, that is username and password, जब उधर payload use किया जाता है, तो then then a request is initiated from the front end. जो आपको दिखता है, front end is basically the UI interface which you see on the browser. Browser पे जो login page होता है, that is the UI in which you put the input parameters, right? So once that is done, a request is initiated from the front end to the server. Server पे ये लिखा जाता है कि what is the type of what is the thing that you should be doing with the received input, right? So if it is a login request, what should be done? It should fetch, it should look at the database if there is a corresponding username and password. अगर है तो फिर then there should be a valid login request, right? Then the next set of request and response cycle should begin, right? So when we are able to inject some sort of malicious data into these particular inputs, and that inputs are directly embedded to the query which is sent between the server and the database, and we are able to retrieve some sort of data that we want to retrieve. So basically we are able to control this query that is initiating from the server. That is when a NoSQL injection vulnerability is triggered. Before we move on to the vulnerability and the exploitation part, let's understand how do we query NoSQL databases. Okay? So when we talk about NoSQL databases, if you might have worked with SQL databases, there might be operators like select. There might be operators like select. Have you worked with SQL databases? Okay. So there is select, union, and other types of operators that you use to retrieve a set of valid data that you want, right? Just like that. So when we talk about NoSQL databases, these are the common operators that we use. One second. So when we talk about, when we want to the data to be compared between certain aspects, right? Like for example, if it is a login page, there is a set of input which user gives and which the data which is retrieved from the database. Now the server has to compare between the two, right? So that is when we use comparison based operators, that are EQ, NE, GT. These are just abbreviations. So when we talk about EQ, right, it stands for equal, right? And NE is for not equal. So it is just the opposite of that. GT stands for greater than, GTE stands for greater than equal to. So these are just the mathematical operators, but in a NoSQL based sense, right? And there are other. So this is for lower than, equal to, right? So you get the gist. And the next one is logical operators. That is or, and, not, and or, right? Now what we'll do is we'll just navigate to our MongoDB database, and then we'll try and extract some sort of data so that you are familiar with what we are going to be doing while we are injecting these payloads, right? Okay. So we'll just exit out of this. So what we are currently on is basically we are on a Linux based system on which MongoDB database is there, right? We'll just connect to that. Sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, so now that we have connected to the MongoDB database, we'll learn about the operators that we are going to be using. So we will be using operators to retrieve certain types of data that we want to fetch, right? So when we are in a MongoDB database, the first thing that we want to search is what are the types of databases available. So what we'll do is we'll just do show databases. Okay. So as you could see, is it visible? Yeah. So these are the 4 types of databases that are available to us: admin, test, local, and non-auth, right? So one second. Okay. We'll just do that again. So the 4 databases are showed: admin, config, local, and non-auth, right? Now the application which we are running has the database of non-auth. So we'll just use that. Use, right? Hope it is visible to you guys. Just don't ignore the last part. That just stands for the type of shell, right? So we are currently in the non-auth. We'll just use show config. Sorry. So collection. So these are the types of collections we have. Sorry. Yeah. So the only connection we have is users. Now we want to retrieve data from users, right? How do we go about that? Is we use db.users. Then what we'll do is we'll use the function find. Find is used to access data within the MongoDB databases. So in which what we'll be using is we'll passing a valid JSON. So whenever we just give it two curly brackets, so what it will do is it will print the entire database, right? We'll just do that. As you could see, these are the data that the current database holds, or this is the collection it holds, for example, right? So if you want to specifically, what do you say? If you want to specifically look for a database, a particular type of username, right? If you want to retrieve certain data of a particular username, for example, if you want to retrieve data about a particular user with the username George Wilson 19, right? If you only want to do that, what you will do is basically will use the whatever the attribute is username. You will provide it the valid string which you want to search it with, right? Right. So if you would just use username and the corresponding string with which you want to search, you would get the data, right? This is the data, right? So this is now what we will do is we'll now try and use operators instead, right? Now what if I want to use certain operators to retrieve certain types of data, right? So one of the operators, what was the first operator we saw? Yeah, comparison in EQ, right? So we will be retrieving data by, we will be retrieving data by using EQ. What we'll do is we'll create a valid JSON for EQ. We'll use EQ. Sorry. Now, what we are going to be searching is we are going to be looking at the username with admin as the username, right? So we'll use EQ admin. So what it will do is it will fetch through the entire database through in the data which has the username admin. So as you could see, we have the data for the user which has the username admin. So this is how you use operators to get access to a certain types of data. Now, what happens if we use any, the next operator, that is? So that any stands for? Yeah. So what is the data which does not equal the username is or username not equal to admin, right? So it will print all the data except the data which has username admin. So if you were to look at it, you wouldn't find admin in this particular thing, right? Yeah, that is how you use any and EQ, right? These are the operators which you use to get data. We'll be talking about how do we exfiltrate data by using payloads, and that particular time we'll be using these particular operators. So just for your knowledge, we are doing this, right? One of the other operators is regex. Have you used regex? Regex? How many of you are from computer science background? You have never heard of regex? Regular expression is regex. Yeah, so what we can do is we can use certain types of regex to fetch data as well. So for the people who are familiar with regular expressions, what does this particular characters stand for? All the three characters. If you can name them, we'll get a reward for you guys. We have a reward for you guys. Sorry?
Last one is asterisk.
Yeah, hashtags. What does it stand for? No, not all the data. Wildcard. But what does it do? Right. No, not. It will not consider any of the characters. Anything else? Okay. So what I'll tell you guys. So the dot over here stands for any characters. It could be special character, A, B, any of the characters, right? And whenever there is the special character, what do you say? What is the special character known as? The center one. So that particular character starts with. So whenever you want a particular data to start with certain things, you use that particular character, right? And the next one is hashtags. So it stands for any number of times the character repeats. So basically, if there is an hashtag, it can be that particular character has 0 or infinite occurrences. So let's take an example. If you want if you want your data that you're going to be retrieving to be starting with A, right? So what you will do is basically you will use the character which I have selected right now, this character, and what you will do is you will put a after that. So what it will suggest to the database is you just give me the data through in which the first character stands for A. Sorry, first character is A, right? And the rest of the characters, if you want to the A to occur many times, so you could just use asterisk as well. So you could have a look at what a regular expression is in your free time. We'll be not having much discussion about that, but this is just to brief you guys about what regular expression is and what we are going to be retrieving, right? So now that we have some sort of idea about what we are going to what NoSQL databases is, how do we retrieve that, we'll do one more operator, the regex one, and then we'll move back to our exploitation part, right? So if I want the data to be retrieved for the user admin, right? I do not know if there are multiple users which has the starting 4 characters or 5 characters admin. How do we go about enumerating that? Is basically we'll use the this particular character, and then you will use admin, and then what you could do is you could put a star, right? So what it is written over here is basically the word should start from admin, and it could have the last particular character could have any number of occurrences. So it could be admin and admin n. So basically multiple occurrences of n. So if you want some other characters to be done, so you could just put that. The dot stands for any of the characters. It could be special character plus whatever it is, right? So you could just do that. So as you could see, there is only one data over here which starts and ends with, which starts with admin and whatever it is, right? So this is how you basically retrieve data from a NoSQL database standpoint. Okay. So we are finished with the operators, right? Now what we will do is we are going to be exploiting 3 scenarios of NoSQL injection. The first one is we are going to be bypassing authentication by using the same operators. We will be like exfiltrating data. So inbound exfiltration is when you see the output in the response itself. You guys know, right? The request and response cycle. Yeah, so if the response contains data that we are trying to exfiltrating, it is known as inbound. And in the scenarios where we do not get output or the data within the response, we use blind exfiltration methodology. So let's go about that. The first one is authentication. So let's take an example of login page. Okay? So in the login page, when you put username and password, this is how your normal request looks like. It sends a post request with the parameters username, password, right? So these are the input fields which you usually fill. You provide your username and then your password, and this is how it looks like in HTTP protocol, right? Okay? So when this particular request is sent to the server, it processes that particular request and fetches data according to that. Now, what if we put the operators that we use, right, for MongoDB? We use the operator not equal to. Now, what it is trying to do is it is trying to fetch a user with the username not equal to null. Not equal to null is basically a MongoDB operator, so it considers as such. It does not take it as a string. It does not consider this as a username. What it does it takes it as an operator, and what it does it looks for value scenario in which the username and password is not equal to null, right? When usually when you log in or register to a web application, it is usually the case you provide some sort of username and password, right? So it is never null. So it returns all the data that is within the databases, and within that database, what is the topmost functionality is being returned. So as you could see, if you were to look at here, we would be looking at the function not find but find one. Find one will take the topmost topmost data set. So if it returns about 10 data, so it will just take the topmost data. Yeah, so it will just select a particular user that it wants to log in as. So let's look at that. How do we go about that? Okay. So this is the web application that we are going to be logging to, right? Back to the login page. So this is the login page. We'll put a valid credential. We'll intercept that. So currently the valid credential is admin@admin.com. That is the valid email ID. Okay. So once we have logged into the application, if you look at our burp suite logs, if you were to navigate to our burp suite logs, there will be a post request generated to the login endpoint, right? What we will do is we'll just send this to repeater. We'll access the repeater. As you could see, the email ID and the password that we provided is over here, right? What we will do is we'll just send just to look at what is the normal behavior of the application. As you could see, when we did send the request, it is visible to you guys, right? Yeah. So as you could see, if there is a successful login, what the user does is basically it gives the user JWT token, its valid details, other details, the ID, username, email address, and other things, right? So this is a valid request. So what if the password is wrong? What does it do? Sorry. What I will do is I'll just initiate a new request to the repeater. Sorry. Yeah, as you could see, what if I put a wrong password? Okay, whatever it is. So it says invalid credentials when there is a wrong password, right? So what we can do is now we can change the operator that we are going to be using. So what we'll be doing is we'll be using our operator not equal to as it will select all the types of list. Sorry, what it will do is it will look for the email address admin.gmail.com, and whenever it is looking to match the password, what it will do is it will match with not equal to null. So it will create a true statement which will result in you logging into the application, right? If you were to just put that, so even without a login credential, we were able to get access to this particular account. If you just know the email address, and in the current scenario, the email parameter is not vulnerable to NoSQL injection because it is sanitized. But when we talk about password, it is not sanitized, and that is the issue over here. The main issue with the input-based vulnerabilities is basically they are not able to sanitize the particular user input, or the validation. Validation is a scenario where the input that you provide does not conform to what it actually should be. So for example, if it is a phone number is what they are asking, so they should only accept the characters that are numbers, right? They should not accept the characters that are like characters, because they will not be, that will not be included in the phone number, right? So that is what validation is. So in the current scenario, there is no validation or sanitization on this particular user input password, with which even if we did not know the password, we were able to successfully log into the application. Okay, so we'll navigate to our second scenario in which we'll be able to exfiltrate data, right? So think of a scenario where if you know the right passwords, only then you will be able to retrieve some sort of data, right? So let's take an example where, let's take an example where the application returns, if you provide it with a valid username, it provides you with other PII based data. So PII, what it is, basically email IDs, phone numbers, and other sorts of personal identifiable information. So whatever it is, so it returns with certain types of data, right? So what we can do is we can initiate this request again. We'll just intercept the request. If you were to see, there is an request being intercepted. We'll just send this to repeater. And as you could see, this is what we are trying to search. We are trying to search for a what? I have already done that.
Maybe try going on the notepad and typing things in this copy paste.
Yeah. Do you have any questions?
I have one doubt.
Yeah.
What if this null word is blacklisted?
Null word is, so basically in certain scenarios there will be blacklist available. So what you could do is you could just use other operators, or you could use some other thing. So basically when we use not equal to null, so what we are saying is basically the password is not null, right? What we could do is instead give it a string. We could say it as not equal to, and then provide it with some gibberish string as well. So if you were to see that, I think this is the valid request, right? So if it is blacklisted, what you could do is you could provide it with a valid string that might be anything gibberish. So until and unless this particular gibberish is the real password, it will just log into your application, right? Yeah. So as you could see, I think there is some issue with my burp suit right now. Okay. Okay, I get it. Okay. So as you could see, what I am currently doing is trying to search for a certain type of data. So whenever I provide a valid username, it gives me all sort of data belonging to that particular user. It gives me email ID and other things, right? So it even gives another password reset token. So that is unintended vulnerability from my side. Yeah, but whatever it is, it gives a lot of data of that particular user. So what if I want to retrieve data for all users? How do I go about that? Any operators which come to your mind? Sorry? Or operator, we could do that, but it is much more complex, right? When we could use simpler operators before that. We could use any as well, or we could just use regex or some other thing.
Not equal to.
Sorry?
Not equal to null.
Yeah, we could do that. Not equal to null. So how you go about doing that is, so what we are going to be doing right now is basically we are going to be doing the NoSQL, sorry, not equal to operator. We'll just give it, I will just give it null, right? What? Yeah, and I'll just change this. Okay, so when we'll just do that, we get information about 50 of the users. You get all sorts of information like their username, passwords, phone number, and other things. So the role which they belong to, even though you do not know their username. So this is just to exfiltrate data in cases. So what sort of injection is this? Yeah, NoSQL injection, but what type is it? In-band SQL injection. Sorry, NoSQL injection. So in which you can see the response in the you can see the data in the response itself. So it is in-band NoSQL injection, right? So let's talk about in a scenario where you do not have access to this particular thing. So you will not be retrieving data as such. So how can you go about enumerating in that particular scenario, right? So for that, okay, so we'll have to log out. So this is the password for forget password functionality, in which if you were to provide it with a valid email, it will show some sort of response, right? I'll just show you 1 second. Yeah. So this is the request which we are going to be targeting, right? So over here, as you could see, this is a forget password functionality. When it is a valid email that you are providing, it says if a user exists with this email, password reset link has been sent to that particular mail. So if there is a valid user for this particular email ID, the email will be initiated. So what happens in a scenario where the email ID is not right? So as you could see, in a scenario where it is not, so it says that user does not exist with this particular email. So what we can infer from this particular thing is basically we are able to understand what might be the query in the backend, right? So what it is trying to do when it is a valid user or when it is a valid query that is being sent to the database, it is sending the first statement. And when it is a non-valid statement or query, it is sending us the second one. So what if we are able to manipulate this and get some sort of information, like even though the data is not being displayed, like the username, email, passwords, the things are not being displayed, how can we get information from the backend? Anyone? This is a scenario of user enumeration, but how do we go about exploiting other things? Now, what if I want the password of this particular user? How can I get that? Yeah. Yeah. Right. So basically, some sort of logical operation is going on in the backend, right? So when it is a valid query, it is giving us some other result, and when it is not, it is giving other result, right? So in such scenarios, what you could do is you could, if you have the source code, you could have a look at that. In the current source code, if you were to see. So as you could see, there is this where operator being used before sending this particular request to the database. So whenever there is a where request in the backend, right? So what we could do is we could inject JavaScript into this. So if the current backend is written in JavaScript, right? So we will be able to inject JavaScript over here. So what we can achieve with that is basically whenever where operator is there, you can use JavaScript. So what if we create a logical statement which is true, and in some cases it is false. Okay, I think now it's done. Yeah. So when it is a valid JavaScript query, what it is doing is we are creating a logical query which makes the entire statement true currently. So it is making the initial statement if you were to look at the source code, what it is doing is where this email is equal to whatever we are trying to give it, we are giving it as null. So it is not selecting any of the users because we are not providing it with valid email, right? But when we talk about the next part of the statement, what we are trying to inject is basically, this is common in SQL injection. If you have read about that, you will have a good idea about that, about the scenario where you use boolean based payload to create it a true statement, right? So currently what we are trying to do is we are trying to achieve the boolean based payload by using JavaScript. So when it is a valid statement, that when 1 is always is equal to 1, right? So it is just a true statement just to make it true. So what if this in the current scenario, what if we make this particular statement as false? Okay. So yeah. So in the current scenario, as you could see, this is a invalid statement because one is not equal to 2, right? So in this particular scenario, it will give us the other response, that is user does not exist. So what we can infer from this is basically whenever there is a valid string, so whenever this particular condition sets to true, we will get the valid response. So the initial first response statement. And when we talk about invalid request, we will get a user does not exist with this particular email address. This is what we can do. So now we have to try and create a particular payload to exfiltrate data. So how we do that is basically we'll use this password and then brute force each and every character of that particular password. If you were to look at the database, for the admin user, the password is saved as a hash, right? So the first character is a special character and that stands for $. So what we will be doing is we'll be creating we'll be brute forcing this by using intruder. So we'll be setting each and every, brute forcing each and every character of this up to 10 characters. So you'll do that and then we can just infer that. We can brute force the other things as well because with time attackers can do that. But due to time constraints, we are going to be brute forcing only the first 10 characters. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll just send this particular thing to intruder. So this is just the payload. Okay. Okay. So as you could see, this is a valid query. What we'll do is we'll set a payload over here. Right? We'll add a payload over here and a payload over here as well. We'll have to provide it with certain characters. Okay. Okay. So we'll just brute force this particular. Okay. So what we'll be doing is we'll be brute forcing the first initial 10 characters, right? So we'll just set that to a cluster bomb attack. First initial set of payloads will be numbers, right? Will be ranging from 0 to we'll just do that first initial 10. Okay, and then we'll just set the second payload as well. What we'll do is we'll just brute force the entire set of characters. So brute forcer. Let's copy this part as well because we are going to be brute forcing the the uppercase characters as well, and we'll be using the special characters as well, right? So we'll just do this as well. Okay. We'll just reduce this. Okay.
So the single pair of quotation would work.
Sorry.
The single pair of quotation would work, or do you need to adjust that in the start?
I think it will work. We'll just have to see because it's not, the application is not functioning as such. ठीक है. What we'll do is we'll just go about testing that out right now. We will just use max length as one as well. We'll just brute force that. And as you could see, it is already done with the brute force. So what we'll do is now segregate the output accordingly. So the first thing that we want to look at is there is any, okay, so there is no, okay. Did we put the special character? Yeah, that is there. Okay, so what we are going to be looking at is basically the response, right? So if you were to look at the response, user does not exist with this particular email, should not be there. So what we'll do is we'll do a negative search for that. We'll just navigate to intruder. And in the payload section, we'll just select this. We'll just paste that out. Okay. So we'll just do a negative search and click on apply. Okay. So there is no other characters. I think there is some issue with the payload. Okay. What we'll do is we'll just try and do this, brute force this manually. We'll just look at the first payload, first character. First character was a special character $, right? We'll just try and do that. Does that give us the valid response? Okay, so sorry. Just hit enter. So yeah, we had to use the OR operator over there instead of AND. So as you could see, the first character is $, and the second one is 2, right? So if you were to look at the database, as you could see, the first one is $, and the second one is 2. So what we could do is, instead of doing brute force using intruder, we'll just do that first initial 2 or 3, 5 characters manually, because there is some issue with the tool. Okay. We'll just, the second parameter was 2, right? So okay, I did not change the payload position. So if you were to, so you will have to change the 0 to 1 as well. So you will have to incrementally change that. So the first character will be denoted by 0. The next one will be 1, 2, and so on, right? So the second character, that was 2. So as you could see, it did give us the valid response. We'll just use some other characters just to verify. For in the same, same position, that was the second position. When we use some other character, it did not show up as with the right results, right? So this is how we usually go about enumerating this. And what you could do is you could use a Python script to automate this process and exfiltrate each and every data out. Currently, I would like to show that in Intruder, but there is some issue going on with the Bob suit itself. So yeah, that was it for the today's session.